Instead of closing the output gap, what if we want to close the inflation gap? Meaning we want to see inflation go back to our target rate of inflation. Well, notice we're going to want to move inflation back down. So we're going to want to be somewhere here. And we know that the only thing that we can change with policy is aggregate demand. So we're going to have this point C. And this should make sense that we can't solve both things when we're in stagflation, right? There's no divine coincidence in stagflation. So output would go down to C. And how do we see that? Well, we see that with our aggregate demand curve shifting to the left. So let's talk a little bit more about that down here. So if we're trying to close the inflation gap, we're going to have to do contractionary monetary policy. And so if we do contractionary monetary policy, that means R bar is going to increase. So I have my increase in R bar means that overall interest rates are going to go up. So consumption, investment, net exports, all those are going to go down. That's going to shift my aggregate demand curve back to the left. As we've done before with monetary policy changes, we want to start with my aggregate supply, so then we can set everything up. Here's where my output's going to be in my IS curve. IS has not changed. Remember, there's no fiscal policy going on. There's no other shocks. So this is showing our higher interest rate, which we are very interested in seeing because that's what we said we're going to do with this contractionary monetary policy. So I know where the interest rate's going to be. I also know that we are closing the inflation gap, so I know where inflation's going to be. So that gets us a point C, right, that has both interest and inflation. So we can draw exactly where this MP curve is going to be. So my MP curve, which will be MP, let's call it sub C, is going to be higher. It's a shift up because of that increase in R bar. And now we see how we have closed the inflation gap, right? Inflation has come back down. However, we've expanded the output gap. So inflation, yes, has gone back towards the target, but the unemployment rate is going to be much higher now because output has fallen even further. And so this would be if we saw hawkish policy, right? Hawkish monetary policy. This is what Paul Volcker did in the early 1980s to get rid of that super high amount of inflation that we were seeing and really gave up some short-term growth, right? Caused the overall output to fall back even further in order to stabilize those prices. And we've seen stable prices pretty much ever since. So that was hawkish monetary policy if we have a stagflation where we are expanding the output gap, but we do get to close that inflation gap.